In the beginning, Kousei was shown sitting in his classroom. There was no teacher present, and all the students were doing their own things. Kousei was drawing something in his notebook with a smirk while thinking about a Dutch-style design with Polonia and Kumiko latticework on the finish. At the same time, another student suddenly screamed about showing his Oheitini pitching form, while the student beside him shouted at him, asking where he was throwing. Immediately after that, Kousei was hit by a piece of cloth. The scene showed 3 of Kousei's classmates looking at him as Kousei grabbed the cloth and identified it as the dust cloth. One of the classmates apologized repeatedly, saying it was his mistake. Kousei looked at the student and addressed him as Utsuzawa, but then corrected himself by stating that the name was Kutsuzawa. The other boy acknowledged this and said that it was probably his first time hearing Kousei's voice. The boy then asked what Kousei had been drawing and wondered if it was anime art, telling him not to hide it because he watched Pitsumatsu too. At that moment, a voice from behind reacted in surprise, asking if it was real. A girl screamed about Hoshikawa being in a picture with Miko Chaso while holding a magazine. That was when Hoshikawa was introduced, and she reacted casually, saying it was cool. One of the classmates reacted by saying it was amazing, while another wondered aloud whether reader models could really get close to real models. Hoshikawa explained that they just happened to be on the same shoot. The scene then showed the boy completely focused on the girls and totally ignoring Kousei. Kousei asked whether the boy was listening and held up the cloth, asking what he should do about it. The boy continued to ignore him and instead questioned why Kousei was yelling, saying he wanted to hear as well, before joining the girls' conversation. At that point, Kousei thought to himself that he would just go wash his face. Seikka noticed him as he left. Kousei was then shown in the men's bathroom, washing his face while thinking that he had finally had a chance to talk and had completely blown it. He reflected that a few months after starting high school, friend groups had mostly settled, and he had missed his timing and ended up isolated, like a classic loner introvert. He wished he could talk to people as easily as that guy, and believed that such behavior probably came from being at the top of the school hierarchy. He imagined that if he tried talking to a popular group like that, it would go badly even in the best-case scenario, and possibly much worse. A scene appeared showing Kousei strapped to a log in a T-pose, imagining himself being punished while begging and apologizing. He then continued thinking that it was not just about the popular crowd and wondered whether he could even make friends at all. He questioned how he had made friends before and thought that if he had shared hobbies, things might have been different. From his perspective, getting hyped together over the same content felt like a talent. He concluded that all he could really do was what he was already doing. Kousei then left the bathroom when someone called out to him, saying they had been looking for him. Kousei asked if the person was the one who sat next to him. The girl introduced herself as Yokokura and apologized for bothering him out of nowhere. She explained that she wanted to ask him a favor after school and addressed him as Kutsuzawa-kun. Time passed, and a scene showed a stool as someone announced that it was fixed. Yokokura praised Kousei, saying he had fixed it in no time. Kousei responded modestly, explaining that he had simply re-nailed the cracked A-TED board. Yokokura commented that his hands moved very fast, and Kousei explained that his family ran a furniture workshop and that he helped out there. Yokokura expressed surprise and said that she had caught a glimpse of his notebook during lunch break and figured he might be good at this, which turned out to be true. Kousei explained that while it helped with the family business, he also designed things he wanted to make as a hobby. Yokokura praised him and said he was basically already a craftsman. Kousei denied this, saying he still had a long way to go, and asked what the equipment was for. Yokokura explained that it was club equipment and that their budget was tiny, so Kousei had really saved them. Kousei replied that it was no trouble and that he was glad to help. Yokokura suddenly remembered something when another person entered the classroom and told her it was time to go to the club. Yokokura apologized, said she was coming, thanked Kousei again, and invited him to come hang out at their club sometime. As Yokokura left waving, Kousei wondered what club it was. He thought she was nice and even his type, but realized she was social, and thought it might have been presumptuous to think they could be friends. He then corrected himself and tried to think positively, noting that he had talked to 2 classmates that day. He reflected that even something called an overnight Samita carousel had taken days to build, and that friendships were not built overnight. He decided there was no need to rush, and believed he would eventually find people he could click with. The scene then showed Seikka riding her bicycle while humming to herself. The scene shifted again to Kousei thinking that a cloud looked like the Toyotomi family crest and joking to himself about wishing he were as good at winning people over as Hideyoshi. Suddenly, Seikka almost fell from her bicycle, but Kousei ran over and grabbed it just in time. Seikka reacted by saying it did not hurt before realizing what had happened. Kousei asked repeatedly if Seikka was okay while clearly in pain from the bicycle hitting his solar plexus. Seikka thanked him sincerely and praised his speed, asking if he was alright. Kousei held his stomach and insisted he was fine while thinking that Seikka was probably part of the gal group in his class. He struggled to remember her name and mistakenly thought it was Dochi-san. Seikka reacted with confusion and corrected him, introducing herself as Mizuguchi Seikka and explaining that Dusuguchi was her friend. She then helped him stand up. Kousei internally panicked, realizing he had mixed up the name of the queen of the class. Seikka asked who he was, but Kousei began to leave dramatically while thinking about apologizing to his parents. Seikka reacted in confusion and amusement, saying she did not understand why he was acting like that but found him funny. Kousei realized she was not mad. Seikka reminded him that she had introduced herself and asked him to introduce himself as well. Kousei complied, stating his name as Kutsuzawa Kousei. Seikka repeated his name with an odd expression, and Kousei explained the kanji meanings. Kousei then worried about her reaction and imagined worst-case scenarios where he was judged or confronted. He decided it would be best to leave while he still could and said he would get going, thinking they probably would not talk again. Seikka stopped him, and both of them noticed that the bicycle chain had come off. Kousei internally retracted his earlier thought and offered to fix it. Seikka reacted with surprise and apologized. Kousei reassured her that it would not take long and reflected that her apology made him reconsider his impression of her, despite the rumors about her being a reader model. After fixing the chain, Kousei announced that it was done. Seikka reacted enthusiastically, calling him a god, and taking a picture while asking if she could post it on Twitter. Kousei was shocked that she was filming without asking, and requested that she not put it on the internet. Seikka assured him that his face was not visible and that only her friends could see it. Kousei nervously agreed and internally noted his weakness to extrovert energy. Kousei advised her to replace the worn chain and said he would head out. As he left, he thought about how he never understood extroverts and felt completely drained, deciding to go home and relax. However, Seikka followed behind him, causing Kousei to think she was following him. Seikka asked whether his place was close, and Kousei internally panicked before replying that it was within walking distance. Seikka commented that she wished she lived closer as well. Kousei feared she might actually follow him home and pointed out his direction. Seikka reacted as if she had never been that way before, which made Kousei even more suspicious, until Seikka revealed it was just a joke and said goodbye. They parted ways, but Seikka suddenly ran back to thank him again. She insisted on a high five, which Kousei understood and returned. Afterward, Kousei reflected that Seikka had gone out of her way just to say thank you and realized he might have misjudged her. Seikka said goodbye again, and they separated. As Kousei walked away, he thought that maybe things were different than he assumed, while Seikka smirked. The next morning, Kousei entered the classroom and thought it was noisy. Yokosuga greeted him casually, which surprised him. She explained that something had appeared on Mizuguchi's Twitter. Kousei tried to stay calm, thinking it was not confirmed to be him. Yokosuga showed him the picture of Kousei fixing Seikka's bicycle, labeled as her boyfriend. Kousei felt sick and claimed he was fine despite feeling like his breakfast might come up. Yokosuga pointed out that most people would not consider that fine. Kousei noticed the other boys and feared a figurative witch trial, imagining himself tied to a log again. Seikka then entered the classroom, greeted by everyone. Kousei thought about how unfortunate the timing was and hoped to avoid even small talk. However, Seikka noticed him, greeted him directly, and thanked him again for the previous day. Kousei froze, internally recognizing the sound of losing the trial. Then the scene shifts, and Seikka continues by thanking Kousei for yesterday, saying that her bike was running really smoothly, almost like brand new. Kousei responds by saying that it was good to hear, while thinking to himself that the pressure from behind was insane. At that moment, the guy from yesterday appears and greets Seikka, saying that she looked lively this morning. Kousei thinks to himself that it was the rag guy from yesterday. Seikka greets the guy back by saying good morning to Miyazaka. Miyazaka then asks whether the two of them were always this close. Kousei thinks to himself that Miyazaka had asked the question. Seikka responds by telling Miyazaka that it was none of Miyazaka's business. Kousei thinks exactly the same, noting that it was not Miyazaka's business. Miyazaka then grabs Miyazaka's phone and explains that Miyazaka had been casually scrolling through classmates' Twitter yesterday, and that Mizuguchi's post had caught Miyazaka's eye totally by chance. Kousei thinks to himself that there was no way it was by chance. Seikka responds by saying that it was nice talking and reacts awkwardly. Miyazaka insists that it was a coincidence. Kousei thinks to himself that it was a weak excuse from Miyazaka. Miyazaka then shows the phone, which displays Kousei sitting and fixing Seikka's bicycle, and says that the guy in the video was Kutsuzawa-kun, asking whether the two of them were dating. Kousei thinks to himself that it was a nice one from Miyazaka, and that was exactly what Kousei wanted to ask. Then Kaz says that they had just happened to bump into each other, but before Kaz can finish, Miyazaka suddenly screams and tells Kaz to spit it out already. Seikka responds by asking why Miyazaka is yelling out there, and Miyazaka apologizes. Seikka then says that, as stated before, whether Seikka has a boyfriend or not is none of Miyazaka's business, and asks why Miyazaka is always speaking as if picking a fight. Miyazaka, while blushing, starts to say that it is because of something, but suddenly a girl grabs Miyazaka by the shoulder and moves Miyazaka aside. It turns out they are Seikka's friends. One of them greets Seikka casually, while another says good morning. Seikka responds by greeting them back. One of the girls then asks what Seikka is doing out there and who the guy is, while the other girl asks whether he is the guy from Seikka's Twister yesterday. Seikka confirms that he is the same one. Meanwhile, the boys from the class are shown eavesdropping on the conversation as one of the girls mentions that she saw a guy on Seikka's work account and asks whether Seikka has a boyfriend. Seikka explains that she had just posted it to the wrong account and that Kaz had simply helped her on the way home yesterday. The other girl responds by saying that it was just that. After all, Kaz then thinks that Kaz is forgiven, while all the boys from the class stop eavesdropping and return to doing their own work. Then a girl tells Seikka that homeroom is starting and says that she is heading off. Seikka responds by saying, okay. Seikka then looks at Kaos and says that Kutsuzawa-kun will be thanked properly later, which leaves Kaos confused. From behind, Miyazaki is shown looking at both of them. The scene then shifts, showing that some time has passed. The teacher announces that that is all for today and tells the class to review until next time. Kaos is shown sitting silently at his desk. Suddenly, Seikka comes up to Kaos and asks Kutsuzawa's senpai what he usually does for lunch, saying that she will treat him to lunch as thanks. Kaos thinks to himself what this character is about. Kaos then shows his bento and says that he brings a bento, apologizing. Then Seikka says that it is surprising and comments that Kaos's mom must be very dedicated. Kaos responds by saying that it is not his mom and that he makes it himself. One of Seikka's friends reacts in surprise and asks whether Kutsuzawa can cook, expressing amazement. At that moment, Kaos remembers Seikka mentioning earlier that her friend's name was Doguchi. Kaos then returns to the present and thinks to himself that this must be the real Doguchi-san. Doguchi immediately screams that there had been a fake one, while Seikka is shown laughing. The narration then introduces both of Seikka's friends, one being Doguchi Chika and the other being Sanda Rai. Doguchi tells them to wait a minute, while Seikka asks what is wrong and urges everyone to go eat. Seikka then says that she did not want to mooch, but that Kaos's bento could be another option. Seikka immediately denies it loudly. The scene then shifts, showing all four of them sitting together at desks and eating their bentos, while everyone says that it is time to eat. Kaos thinks to himself why he is eating with them. Seikka insists that it is not what it looks like, while Doguchi comments about getting bread. Kaos then thinks to himself that it might just be in his head, but he feels eyes on them after what happened earlier. Rai then compliments Kaos, saying that the bento looks nice and asks if he made it himself. Rai points at Kaos's bento, mentioning the grilled fish and other items and noting that it must have taken a lot of work. Kaos responds that it is not really that much work and explains that he uses quick recipes. Rai then says that she might try making one herself. Kaos asks whether Rai makes her own bento, to which Rai replies that her boyfriend insists on making her a homemade bento for her every time. Then Sonata says that telling someone to cook just because they are a girl is messed up these days. Kaos thinks to himself that he might have stepped on a landmine. Seikka then whispers to Kaos that it is fine and that Sonata is not mad, explaining that it is all humble bragging, and that although Sonata complains, Sonata is always smiling. Sonata angrily tells Seikka to stop whispering weird things. Seikka responds by telling Sonata to take the bragging somewhere else. Doguchi then comments that Seikka is the one who brags the most when Seikka gets a boyfriend, and Sonata agrees with Doguchi. Seikka replies that of course she will brag, because when she gets a boyfriend, it will be the real deal with her destined one. Sonata responds by saying that Seikka's head is a full-on flower garden. Kaos thinks to himself that, surprisingly, with someone like Mizuguchi, one would expect her to have had one or two already, but then realizes that he has learned not to judge by looks. Doguchi then asks Kauso whether Kausa is a girlfriend. Kauso replies that he has never had one either and that he spends a lot of time alone. Doguchi reacts by asking whether that is not boring. Kaos responds that it is not, explaining that he makes things as a hobby. Doguchi comments that Kaos is the handy type. Seikka then says that Kaos is a comrade with noble ideals. Kaos responds that it is not like that and that he simply lacks social skills. Seikka then points out that Kaos can talk pretty normally and jokingly asks whether she should stutter and dance more, questioning why she would dance, and mentioning TikTok. Seikka then laughs. The scene then shifts to after school, where Seikka is shown stretching and saying that it is time to head home. Then Seikka looks at Kausi and thinks to herself that he recovered quickly and wonders whether he is speedrunning his way home. Seikka then chuckles internally and thinks that he is funny. Seikka reflects that she keeps looking toward Kutsuzawa and questions whether she is in trouble, realizing that she had noticed Kutsuzawa even before the bike incident. Seikka thinks that Kutsuzawa does not just ride bikes like the other guys, but instead makes and fixes things, and that it feels like Kutsuzawa has his own world. Seikka recalls that Kutsuzawa used to sketch blueprints during breaks before, and that she had secretly peeked once, remembering how the lines were machine precise and how she honestly thought it was amazing. At that moment, someone from behind calls out to Seikka by saying Mizuguchi, and Miyazaka is shown. Seikka responds by asking Miyazaka what it is. Miyazaka then follows Seikka down the corridor and says that he heard a takoyaki shop open by the station one day ago. Seikka responds that she will pass. Miyazaka tells Seikka not to say that and adds that it is his treat. Seikka thinks to herself that she got shot and does not want snacks. Miyazaka insists that a little would not hurt. Seikka then thinks to herself that Miyazaka is only fixated on her because she is the reader model or something like that, and admits internally that she is honestly not good with Miyazaka, describing him as shallow, careless, obsessed with looks, and empty inside. Miyazaka calls out to Seikka again by saying Mizuguchi. Seikka thinks to herself that it applies to her too, then leaves Miyazaka behind while saying that it is nothing and that they can talk later. Then the scene shows Seikka leaving the school, and while walking, Seikka thinks that people have something they love and can face head-on, and that she feels kind of jealous of that. Seikka thinks that she does not feel like she has anything like that, and that even the reader model gig does not feel like something she can say is truly it. Seikka thinks that for Kutsuzawa, making things is that something. Seikka then notices something and stops, thinking that while thinking about him, she somehow found this place, which must be Kutsuzawa's place. Seikka thinks that it is a rare name, so it has to be him, and that she had figured it would not be far from where they split yesterday. Seikka then questions why she even came there and thinks that it is totally stalking behavior. Seikka reads the sign, which says that custom furniture is available. Inside, Seikka sees Kousei crafting furniture. Seikka starts blushing while watching him work and thinks that he really is amazing. Seikka then thinks that at that moment, for some reason, she wanted to capture that scene and take it home. Seikka takes a picture of Kousei. Kousei notices Seikka and gets shocked. And seeing that reaction, Seikka also becomes nervous. Kousei then yells at Seikka, calling her Mizuguchi-san and asking why she is there, correcting himself mid-sentence and saying right now. Seikka apologizes awkwardly and tries to explain herself. As Seikka moves her bicycle forward, the chain falls off again. Seikka remembers that Kousei had mentioned earlier that the chain looked old and that it might be better to replace it. Kousei then comes up behind Seikka, puts his hand on her shoulder, and tells her to please wait. Seikka thinks to herself that it is over.